Well, we may as well get started. So first and foremost, thank you all for joining this on a Friday morning. Standing between you, a little bit of work day and weekend. So thanks for taking the time. So I might introduce myself to kick off. So I'm Jacob, one of the co-hosts today, and one of the co-founders of Brid, which is a Slack-focused consulting company. Help organizations be more productive and efficient in a way that they are enabling Slack for their organization. And with me, I'm joined today by Mike Molyneux. Mike, I might hand to you to do a quick intro, mate.
Yeah, co-founder of a company called Thena, which helps companies manage and service their customers in Slack. Formerly the founder of a company called Branch, which is the mobile app space, where we were talking about using Slack back in 2013, and we serviced all of our or a lot of our customers, especially our enterprise customers, in Slack, which then eventually led to the ideas that would become Thena. So excited to share some of the practices that we've learned and seen over the years, especially with Slack Connect. But we'll get into all of that shortly.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. And thanks for joining me today. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully that presentation has all come up and is visible for everyone. So the title today is maximizing the full potential of Slack. And we're going to cover off a couple of things for the next 45 minutes or so. And it's really around productivity hacks to make your time spent in Slack more effective and more efficient. So the topic we're going to cover today is setting up Slack for yourself. What are some of the tips and tricks that you can be more structured in the way that you're using Slack today? How can you set up Slack for your teams, whether it be through channels, leveraging new functionality like Canvas and clips and workflows to smoothly onboard new hires? How can you drive productivity through automation and approvals using workflows? And then how can you provide outstanding customer service all the way through Slack Connect? So obviously Mike's giving a quick intro to himself. As I say, I'm one of the co-founders of Brid. Prior to starting Brid, I worked at Slack for 5 years and was their lead success manager for APAC. Probably noticed that I do have a bit of an Australian accent, but I am based in Singapore, which is where we've headquartered the business. So before we get into it, all the presentations usually start with a couple of stats, and I wanted to use this as a way to really prime the conversation as to why it's so important for you to think about how can you be more productive and efficient in the way that you're using Slack. So early this year, Slack announced they had more than 53 million monthly active users. There were more than 750,000 organizations around the world using Slack every day, and more than 1.5 billion messages are sent every day through the platform. But when you look at daily active users, a couple of things really stand out to me. Every day for those people, when they're using Slack, they're spending 9+ hours a day connected to the tool, whether it be through your laptop, through a laptop, or through a laptop, through a computer, through an iPad, mobile device, whatever that may be. And then to narrow that down, they're actually spending 90 minutes of their working day. So well over a tenth of their day actively working in Slack, sending messages, connecting with their customers, using canvases, using clips, which really makes me think, so how can organizations ensure that those 90 minutes are as effective and productive as possible? And how can Slack be a conduit to allow people within their organization to work more effectively and more aligned by taking a channel-first approach to communication and breaking away out of siloed inboxes? So that's sort of the context for today is, taking away a couple of tips and tricks to be more productive and more aligned in the way that you're using Slack within your teams. So to kick things off, a couple of recommendations on the way that you can set up Slack for yourself, not only to be more productive for yourself, but also for your team members as well. A couple of things around updates to your profiles and settings. So things like ensuring that your profile picture is up and available, using statuses to indicate when you may or may not be available. Moving into your setup, which is creating things like folder structures or sections within Slack so that you can prioritize the conversations that are most important to you. And finally, connecting your tools in a way that allows you to bring information into the context of Slack. So you don't need to move from tool to tool to tool to have productive conversations. So to highlight some of this and to demonstrate to you, I've got a Slack workspace that I'm going to walk you through. And you can see here that I have just been added directly to my welcome channel. All right, just get it over to here. Now, you will know that you realize this is obviously familiar for everyone. This is a Slack workspace. So there's a couple of things for you to be aware of, and I'll walk you through how to best set up Slack from the beginning. So on the far left-hand side here, you've got your navigation panel where you can access direct messages. You can view your activity for mentions. You can go into more and access things like workflows, applications, canvases, search across your entire workspace. And then down the bottom here, you've got your profile and preferences. Now, I won't go through all of this in too much detail, but the key ones for you to take a look for are your notifications and keywords. So keywords is really useful if there is a particular phrase or a project that you're working on and you want to be across whenever somebody uses that word or phrase in a conversation that you're a part of. And so by typing in Slack, and that could be something I want to stay across, I'll be notified directly of something that's taking place in one of the channels. Additionally, you can change the theme of Slack, so light and dark mode, of course, and a bunch of really great colors with the new UI. You've then got accessibility, so you can increase the screen size, decrease, I'll leave it at default today, and a whole bunch of other settings and preferences that you can play around with. But really, it's recommended to spend a bit of time setting this up for yourself so that Slack is designed in a way that really meets your requirements and is what you're after. Now, my second recommendation was around setting up sections. And during my time at Slack, one of the really primary concerns or issues that people would raise is there's too many channels, there's too many conversations, and there's not enough structure to the way that the conversation's taking place. So what I would say is spend some time setting up your sections. And if you think of this as folder-like structures for your channels. So I'm going to create one now. So what I'll do is hover over the word channels, click on the drop-down, click on create, and then click on create section. Now, there's some pre-default ones that you can select. You can choose your own emoji, of course, but I'm just going to choose announcements. Once I click on create, you can see then that's been automatically populated. So if you were to maybe imagine this as maybe your key DMs, key projects, key announcement channels, straight away you can see here that it will add structure to your sidebar because it's all expandable and collapsible. And you can really customize this to whatever you want. So you can drop and drag apps into there. You can drop and drag conversations with DMs. And of course, you can drop and drag channels into there as well. So you can really create these spaces for the key conversations related to really any topic that makes most sense to you. And my final recommendation for setting up Slack for yourself was to integrate some applications. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on automations here. And you can see here straight away, there are a bunch of apps that maybe are available for me to use. From there, I'm going to click on apps. And then maybe I might want to integrate my Google Calendar, maybe Athena as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But once I'm ready, I can just click on the application. I can click on app homepage, and then it will take me through an install process, which will allow me to integrate my calendar and reduce the need of having to have the application open and just have all the functionality directly within Slack. Quickly show you how it works. We can add Slack. Make sure it's installed in the right workspace. Click on allow. Great. And so what you'll be able to see here is your full calendar directly within Slack. You'll be able to change your responses to invites that come through. You'll be able to join meetings directly as they come in, and also be able to create new invites as well directly within Slack. So really quick hack, but definitely the time saving having to move between screen to screen. So hopefully those tips were useful. So we're going to move now into some of the sort of more advanced stuff and looking at designing a Slack workspace for you and your teams, and also what an onboarding process would look like within Slack. Now, a couple of ways in how you can best set up Slack for you and your teams. First and foremost is defining a right channel structure. And for those of you who aren't aware, channels can literally be about anything. And the best way to do this is sit down with your team, map out the conversations that your team regularly has, build them into channels, and then allow people to communicate and collaborate accordingly. Some examples that we would typically see are announcement channels to share communications out to your organization, project-based channels, business unit-based channels for BAU projects, help and support request channels, and that could also be Slack Connect as well, where you can connect with your customers to provide feedback and move your work along. Sharing thought leadership within the organization, and also social and more cultural-based channels. Next recommendation would be to leverage things like Canvas, which is a new feature Slack has recently released, to really create a landing page for projects or for channels that you're actively working on. It's a great way for you to capture static information and make it easily accessible to anyone with your organization. And finally, think about how you can incorporate workflows, which is a way for you to collect standardized information and post it into Slack in the form of approvals or forms, and also connecting to other applications as well. So I'm going to go back to Slack and give you a look at what this could look like from an onboarding sense. So earlier in the demo, I opened up to my Welcome to Bridge channel. And this could be my first day in my organization, and I met with this sort of landing page. This is the only information that I get, and I've created this in Slack because this is where my colleagues are, this is where my teams are, and my customers are. So once I get started, it will open the canvas up for me directly, and you can see here there's some engaging elements that I can read through and scan through at my own time. So first and foremost, you've got rich text formatting, you've got the ability to include emojis, you can embed videos and clips as well, embed photos and pictures. You can add in column-based formatting as well. And then you can also link to other channels. So in this instance, I've given an overview of the organization grid. I've provided an overview of the services that we might be able to provide to customers in a Slack sense. And then I've given them direction on how they can find information across Slack, which is ultimately our virtual or digital headquarters. So you can see here that really the first set of activities that I can do is to introduce myself to an entire organization using a workflow. I could then also add myself to all of the other key announcement channels that are across my organization. And then I can also access my 30-day onboarding plan as well. To give you a sense of what the workflow would look like, I'm going to complete that now. So I'm going to click on Start Workflow. You can see that a form has popped up for me to populate, and this is all completely customizable. Some of my favorite hobbies are running, favorite food is pizza, and travel destination is Italy. So once I hit Submit, you'll see here on my channel section that it will pop up in my company introductions channel. So this has got my entire organization in there. It's obviously mentioned me because it's an ad, then it's also added me to the channel. It's transposed all of the input that I put, and then you can also configure it to even reply with a fun little Giphy as well. Now, to go back and give you an idea of what maybe some other workflows could look like, I'll show you maybe the add me to channels. So super simple. I just click on Start Workflow, and straight away you can see that I've been added to my two other channels, which is my announcements channel, where I've got key organizational updates that are being shared into the channel, and also any announcements for learning that could be taking place within my organization. What I might do, I'm going to quickly pause here, Mike. I'd love to hear from you. Obviously, you've built an organization around making Slack more effective. What are some of the tips that you found really useful for your company to use Slack more effectively?
Yeah, I think this has been great, Jacob. So I think some of the things that we have tried to do, so we definitely use the different sections and we encourage folks to do that. Everyone kind of configures it a little bit differently. One of the things, if you expand your channels piece, one of the things we found, and we saw this at Branch, we see this at Athena, and I see this with a lot of our customers, as they start to grow and they might have hundreds of channels, it can actually start to be cumbersome scrolling through everything. And one of the things that I've found a lot of people don't know about, but has been very effective, is the ability to, within a section, decide what you want to show, whether you want to show all channels or just show the unread channels. And so what that can do, and if you want to click into the channel settings there, just click into the little drop down there, under the channel header. I think it's under the channel header. So go into, no, click out of this modal. And it's under, so click out of, hit the X there. And then see where it says channels or announcements? Yeah, exactly. So you can filter it, and you can do this by section, or you can do it for everything, whether it's all activity, just unreads. And that allows you to, if you have hundreds of channels, only see the ones that actually have recent activity in them, which can be really beneficial. One of the other big things internally and externally is naming conventions. And I think you're going to talk a little bit probably about this, Jacob, as well. But we created a guide at Branch, and we've used it at Athena as well, of what type of prefixes we use. So help dash is for any sort of help channels. EXT dash is for any sort of external channels. Ask dash can be for question channels. And you can do all sorts of things like that. So prefixes. We also do project based. So project dash, and if it's temporary, and then if it's like a kind of a one-off thing, we might use a date, like 7th of December incident, and that might be just a temporary channel that we only need for that day, that then we're going to deprecate afterwards. So those naming conventions we've found to be really effective in helping people organize everything.
Yeah, big plus from my side around the naming convention stuff. And one of the earlier things we spoke about was, sitting down with your teams and mapping out where conversation happens around processes, and that lends itself really nicely to creating naming conventions in a way that makes most sense. Maybe one last quick one, Mike. What's the most active channel in Athena? When maybe like how are people engaging with it?
Oh my goodness. The most active channel, transparently, is probably, we have with Athena, so we service all of our customers and prospects in Slack. And we have a triage channel where all of the alerts, whenever a customer asks a question or a prospect asks a question, that sends alerts to a triage channel, which then we collaborate on the request. We can assign it. We can take other actions. That's the one that gets the most activity. But besides that, the other ones that are pretty active, sales channel, customer success channel tends to be pretty active quite a bit. And then our product channel. What's interesting about our product channels is what we've decided to do at Athena, which is differently than how we did it at Branch, is we have a product dash channel for every product line that we have. So we have about 12 different product lines. And so we have 12 different product channels where anyone can come and ask questions, file bugs, feature requests, that sort of stuff. And each one has somebody assigned to it. So the product manager and the key engineer that are assigned to, our request management product or our connectors product, we know exactly who it is that's owning that, and we split it by channel, which kind of keeps everything organized. So those channels tend to be pretty active as well. But yeah, the triage channel, or sales and customer success channels, tend to be the most active.
Yeah, I think one big thing that I took away from that as well, Mike, is just the amount of structure that goes into it, right? Like you mentioned, you have 12 different products. You've got a person who is assigned to that channel for responding and monitoring what's going on. In a world where you say didn't have channels, like what would that look like? How could you possibly structure
that? in a world in which we didn't have channels, like we didn't have Slack, or we just didn't have separate channels for product?
Yeah, I mean, just like you didn't have such a well built out channel structure. Like how could you possibly maintain it?
Yeah, so it would definitely be tough. Everything would probably just go into a couple channels, and then what would probably end up happening, which is what we did a lot at Branch, is probably push things into other systems. Like we spent a lot of time in Jira, push all of our product discussions that were in Jira. The problem with that is when you push things into other systems, we found, and the reason we love Slack so much, is Slack is a place where everybody is and where everybody's collaborating. Once you push things into other systems, that can be beneficial, but it makes it much harder to collaborate. And so if you push things into Jira and you say, hey, we're going to talk about this issue or this bug in Jira, well, if somebody doesn't have a Jira license, and you may not want to give everybody a Jira license in your company. They're not able to see your access or collaborate on that issue. Versus when everything's in Slack, you can have that collaboration, you can have that discussion. And I think that's really what Slack has done for us, and I think for a lot of companies, which has kind of been that collaboration hub, that place where everybody is, everybody talks, and then you might push things out to other systems when necessary. But at the end of the day, where is everybody? Everybody's in Slack.
Yeah. Great call out is bring everything together into Slack and being really coordinated about the channel structure. Now, I am just conscious of time. There are a couple of questions. We'll get to them sort of at the end. But yeah, to quickly play that back, left-hand sidebar is the navigation, preferences down in the bottom left. You've got your channel structure in the sort of the middle pane here, which you can collapse and expand. You can also show and sort things via all and reds mentioned, so on and so forth. And you can also filter up the top here to really reduce that channel list and make it a little bit easier from a visual perspective. We also discussed canvases and onboarding as well. So we'll go back to the presentation and them sort of about talking like working in Slack. And Mike called this out just then around naming conventions, putting that rhythm in around making it really clear and identifiable what that conversation is about, leveraging native features like bookmarks, Canvas, huddles for team meetups, and really promoting an asynchronous way, and incorporating workflows in the way that you're having conversations. So to give you a flavor of this, yes, I've built out a little demo as well. We can maybe get Mike as well to chime in with how they leverage Slack from an internal perspective at Athena and what they're hearing from their customers. So in this example, we're going to go into my project Slack rollout channel. So I've given it a really clear name. Obviously, it's a project to coordinate the rollout of Slack. I've updated the channel name. I've updated the topic to call out who the project lead is for it, and also who the tech lead is, and the planned launch date. I've then also added my team member. Lawrence is going to be working the project with me as well. From there, I've built out a channel canvas, which is really great for capturing all of that static information. And so canvases are accessible just by clicking in the top right-hand corner here. And you can see here that I've then pinned my project plan, which is in a PDF. I can include cards for key contacts for the project. I've then written out sort of the project overview, title, the phases and the scope, of course, and built workflows for things like raising a question or maybe raising a risk as well. So how this would typically work is obviously I'm setting the project up. I've got my canvas in here. I've added everybody in, and maybe I am wanting to have, my first weekly catch up with the team. What's great for this is using a huddle, which is native in Slack, and it's a calling feature. So what you can do is you click on the top right here, and you can see here that a conversation has already started and it's accessible for everyone within this particular channel. Now, if you wanted to schedule this in advance, you can grab the link for the huddle and include it in your meeting invite link as well, so people can join directly from their calendar. But what you can see here is that once I click on the open up, I will be met with a couple of different options. So, of course, I can share my screen, walk you through the presentation that I've got going on. I can emoji react as the conversation develops. There are some individual preferences, but my personal two favorite features are the topic. So I could then put in my week one catch up here. And then when we're having the conversation, we can have all of our agreed items listed. Yeah. So once I hit on enter and I leave, you can see here that all of that conversation, because we've taken a channel first approach, you can see here for anybody who missed the conversation that the topic was the week one team catch up. And then also in the reply, we've got all of the agreed items, the conversation capture that took place. So I need to go searching for that at a later date because it's documented in channel, of course. But also for those people who couldn't make it, they've got that information rather than relying on somebody else giving it to them. I might pause here, Mike. I mean, how are you managing projects today in Slack at Athena?
Yeah, great question. By the way, I just learned about this kind of notes feature with the huddle. That's really neat because before we used to just post everything directly in the channel, but this ties it to the huddle itself. Um, are we handling projects? So we're actually we started using Canvas recently. What's interesting about with at least my role is very go to market focus, so customer facing, sales facing, and we put all of our notes in Slack on the internal channel. So anytime we have a prospect or a customer, we have an internal channel related to them, and as well as an external channel. But on the internal channel, after any meeting, any call, anything that's relevant, we will post notes directly in the channel. So we used to post it directly in the channel. We still do sometimes, but we started using Canvas as well. It's kind of that running log of everything happening with that customer. This has been really nice as a way to collaborate on customers, but also as the running log as things change. Because what we found is absent Slack or before Slack, uh, often you'd have maybe a salesperson would engage with a customer or a prospect and they have notes and maybe they'd put it in the CRM. Maybe they'd put it in Salesforce. You'd hope that they'd put it in Salesforce, or maybe it's trapped away in an email that nobody else has access to. They close, they hand it off to the CSM. Then the CSM has that information, but or they may not. It might be in Salesforce, but they might not have any of the information that's in email. And then as that CSM maybe changes and you have a new person that comes onto the account, they're missing all that information. When you use Slack to kind of organize everything, that allows anyone to come in at any point in the relationship and see the history and see what's happened, as well as be able to search, hey, did we talk about this one specific topic at any point in the past? And so if you have good discipline about updating either project-based or customer-based internally notes and kind of what happened after a meeting, after a call, whatever, then that really makes it easier for other people later on to collaborate and to kind of get up to speed much more quickly, which before pre-Slack, or if you don't do that in Slack, it tends to be a little bit siloed, tends to be trapped away in other systems that may not be as accessible for folks.
Yeah, I really like that channel first approach, right? Because it's, information is what drives alignment, and if everybody's got access to the same context and the same conversations, it really only means that your teams can move quicker because they're not bogged down and searching for information, finding updates, waiting for somebody to come back on leave. So everything's in that one place for them to go and find. Maybe, I guess, pivoting a little bit. I mean, do you take the same sort of approach when you're working with your customers in Slack as well?
Yeah, great question. I'll hit on a few different things here, and then we can kind of dive into maybe some more specifics. But we do. We take the same approach. We try to recap our notes, external facing notes, in the channel as well. What we found, and the reason we love Slack so much for customers, the reason we believe it's such a high engagement channel and the highest engagement channel, is it allows people to easily kind of access information and engage with you with a much lower bar. And that's a positive. When you're dealing with customers, when you're dealing with prospects, you want to be able to get people access to information. Historically, what would happen is if you did everything in email, what we found is, and what I found throughout my career, is things would be siloed. I might be single threaded with a single person on the customer side. The problem is they might leave the company. They might be out sick. Other people don't have visibility. And instead, when we operate within channels, even if we just have a meeting with that one person, when we post notes to the channel, other people, maybe their peers, their boss, maybe the CEO, whoever's in that channel can see that information and, if necessary, engage and interact. That doesn't happen in email. It doesn't happen when things are single threaded. And I remember at Branch, we had some channels that had, I remember one channel in particular, we had 400 people from the customer. I mean, it was a big company. Other channels had hundreds, 150, 200 people, even just 100 or even 50 people from the chat. That's a lot of people that now you can access and give information to, keep them up to speed without them needing to be on the email thread and without them needing to be kind of in the meeting itself. So we do rely on that pretty heavily. And it's just a nice running log of everything we discussed, where historically that stuff would typically get locked away in a private email. You never even have visibility into it. And I like it from a leadership perspective too, being able to keep an eye on everything, on our prospects, on our customers, not needing to be in every call, but being able to see what's happening. So big fan of kind of posting those notes and those updates in the channels as things progress.
Yeah, completely agree. And we're the same at Brid, even though we're obviously a newer budding organization. It's get that information to channel, bring a bit more structure, and bring a bit more visibility. One last question, Mike, as well. So, spoke a little bit about workflows and how you can bring them into the flow of conversation. What's maybe one or two workflows that you've built Athena with the team and that you regularly use?
Yeah, in terms of with customers or internally, just with
Either,
the team in general. Okay.
either or.
Yes. I since a lot of what we do is focused on customers, and that's where we have the most maturity because what we think about all day long. I'll touch on a few different workflows that we have there. So for those that aren't familiar, Athena is a Slack app. You can put it in Slack. You can put it in your external facing channels if you have channels with customers, with vendors, with partners, and we'll keep track of all that. So one of the biggest things that helps me as a leader, but somebody that's engaging with our customers and prospects on a regular basis is when Thena is in an external facing channel, it will detect when somebody asks a question, and we have it set to also send an alert to an internal channel where we call it the triage channel, but an internal channel which gives you additional information and additional action buttons. It also tells you if it's been responded to or not. It also tells you who's working it. This is really important for us because at Branch, before we had Thena and we were managing hundreds of customers in Slack, what we found and what I found personally was A, I had to be in all these channels just to keep an eye on everything. And B, things would often get missed or forgotten about. And so sometimes I'd go into a customer channel and I'd realize the customer had asked a question. Maybe they asked it twice and somebody hadn't seen it, hadn't gotten back to them, hadn't responded. And that's a really poor customer experience. And so one of the things I wanted was being able to track that and make sure that everything is assigned. And if something goes unaddressed for a certain period of time, know that. Maybe get an alert, be able to see that. That was a big one for me. And then the second big one that I really wanted at Branch, which was the first thing I ended up building, which eventually now became productized with Thena, is being able to push messages to all of our customers. I'm a big fan of Slack-based marketing messages, product messages, updates, all sorts of stuff, because I've seen the trend over the last 15 years where email is still a relevant channel from a marketing and a product perspective. However, when it comes to marketing emails and product release emails, somebody needs to be signed up to receive that, and they can always unsubscribe. And then B, they have to open your email and then actually read it. And what we found is those rates have really dropped over the last few years, the last 5 years, especially when we did a study at Branch. And instead, people are living and breathing in Slack as people spend, you said it, people are on Slack 9 hours a day. They're actively engaged at least 90 minutes on average. Many of our customers and many tech companies, I would say, are much higher than that. Those types of folks, they're in Slack. If you send a newsletter to that channel and it has 100 people from your customer, well, those 100 people are going to see it and they're more likely to read it, we found. So I'm a big fan of sending out those types of messages, release notes, marketing messages, events in Slack, because I think it can go a long way of getting people to engage with it.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right on the email campaigning and marketing front. I think it's definitely moving away into much more sort of a Slack-based or community-based way to connect with your customers. And if people aren't looking at their inbox, I mean, how are you going to move a deal along or solve a problem quickly if you're being slowed down because people are just focusing their attention somewhere else? So one thing that we quickly also show you is around, bringing approvals into Slack. And in this example, we can show you how maybe you can automate maybe an internal, maybe press release for your PR company or for your PR team. So maybe in this example here, you're preparing a new brief, and what you want to do is put the contents together for your content team to review and make sure that it's all ready to rock and roll for you to share. So using workflow, I've embedded it in the bookmark bar. Once I click on it, a form will then pop open where you can customize all of this as well, and you can provide hyperlinks, and you can now upload directly into a form as well, which is great if you're wanting to manage expenses or manage accounts payable as well. So you can automate all of this within Slack. So in the example on the screen here, I've filled out the form, and then I've just used emojis to indicate status. So it's saying, this green level 1 is level 1 approved. and the green 2 is level 2 approved. And then that can send notifications out to the relevant team, really without me having to click around. It's just reactions, and you can automate the messaging all directly through Slack's workflow builder. So I've got a couple of tips and tricks around how you can sort of structure channels, use workflows to automate processes, but also a way for you to bring a closer, more aligned conversation with you and your teams, and also your customers as well. So what we're going to do now is just quickly talk about Slack Connect. We've spoken a lot about this today. It's a massive part of both my business and also Athena as well. So just some best practices. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, Slack Connect is your workspace and up to more than 250 other organizations, allowing you to communicate and collaborate in real time in Slack, just as you would internally. So in order to make this the most effective way to communicate and collaborate with your partners is really to think about security and compliance. There are a bunch of controls that are available through the admin console that will allow you to apply rigor, but also allow you to connect with your customers. Once they join the channel, maybe set up some communication guidelines and best practices. Think about when you leverage guests, so inviting somebody into your workspace, and what sort of training and level of integration do you need to build in to allow you and your partners and your customers to work more effectively. So on that note, around working more effectively with your partners and your customers, I think it's a really nice segue to maybe head into Mike and talk a little bit about Athena. There we go. Cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah, over to you, Mike.
Yeah, I'll spend a couple minutes sharing a few best practices. And Jacob, I might actually ask you to switch over to your Slack as well to show people some tips and tricks in Slack Connect. But for those that aren't familiar, Slack Connect allows you to connect two workspaces, your workspace and another company's workspace, just in a channel specifically. So you only have access to that channel, but it allows you to engage with an external company while staying in your own workspace. And this is different than inviting guests, which actually we did in the early days of Branch before Slack Connect came out. Inviting guests means somebody has to actually log into a separate workspace. So this allows people to stay where they're already working, but also connect the workspaces so you can collaborate with other companies. A couple key things here. You can do it with DMs. And you can also do it on a channel basis. And Jacob, maybe if you can show kind of like create a DM and then what it looks like to actually show or to invite somebody as a DM, if the company has the settings such that they can accept a DM from you, basically they'll get a ping that says, hey, Mike from Athena wants to connect here, and that can allow you to engage with them. And it's the same as you would normally do with any DM, except instead of tagging somebody internally, your company, you just enter their email. And if they have that configured, then you can actually do that. So if you X out of that, and I think it's actually the direct messages. Yeah, click on under direct messages, that plus sign. Yeah, right there. And then right there, that is where you can just DM with external people. You just enter their email and then you can set up the DM. Or you can do it on a channel basis. And so if you have a channel, let's say you create a channel, it's internal to begin with. And Jacob, maybe you can just show an example of one where you can click into the channel itself and then you click into settings. And that allows you to use Slack Connect. You can either add people using the add people function, similar to the DM piece, or you can create the share link. That share link then allows you to share externally. And that's where you can put something in an email, or you can put it in a Zoom chat, wherever it is that you might want to have them join. And then when they click that, then they'll have the option to accept to join the channel, and then the workspaces will be connected. One note, depending on your admin settings, that can determine whether or not they can either do it directly or it needs to go through approval. The other thing I'll note here too is name the channel as you want it to be on your side, because the other party will have the option to name the channel differently when they accept the Slack Connect invite. So you don't have to worry about, the channel that you name is what they're going to be forced to use. They'll be able to create their own. Jacob, anything else you want to add there before I kind of talk about a few other things?
Yeah, no, I think a couple of really great examples just around, leveraging Slack Connect and the differences between DM. I would say, it makes sense to, if your customers are on Slack and you're also on Slack, always try to default into bringing the conversation into Slack Connect for the points that Mike raised earlier, right? Is if the team grows, they have access to the context of the conversation. If somebody leaves, then somebody else can be subbed in and they've got access to the conversation as well. So yeah, definitely big plus around using Slack Connect as a way to work with your partners. I'll head back to the presentation, Mike.
Wonderful. The final thing I'll say is with when Thena gets added to these channels. So if you engage with customers in Slack, you can use Thena to track the messages that come in from your customers, use it as a lightweight ticketing system, get alerts, be able to assign even a thread. Let's say a thread comes in and if you treat it as a request, I could, for example, assign that to Jacob so that Jacob knows that he needs to own it. And then we also connect with other systems. So one of the really nice things is everything that's happening in Slack, you can push to Salesforce, either on the account object, or let's say you use Salesforce Service Cloud to as your standard ticketing system, your traditional email ticketing system, everything in Service Cloud. So Thena's built integrations with, for example, Salesforce to be able to say this Slack thread where a customer asked a question. I think if you click into the next slide, we kind of have a visual here, but this Slack thread, we want it to be in Salesforce cases because our support team lives there and we want them to be able to handle it. And with Thena, we have that direct integration where then you can bridge those two. You can put the emoji, the ticket emoji, or you can right click and create a ticket from it. And that will take that Slack thread, create it as a case in Salesforce. And what's nice is that's a bi-directional sync. So your support team can reply from Salesforce, and that can go back into Slack where the customer is and where they originated the request. So that's just one of the examples of where Thena can help kind of bridge some of those workflows when you have kind of these external channels that then those questions, those inquiries need to maybe go into another system. So with that,
yeah. Thanks, Mike. Really, I mean, it's an amazing piece of software, and for those of you who are on the webinar, I would highly recommend, if you're using Slack to connect with your partners and customers to track service work, would highly recommend having a chat with Thena and seeing what they might be able to do to help, bolster up your system of record with the right level of data, but also provide an outstanding level of customer service. So with that, that sort of brings our short webinar to an end. Appreciate you all staying there, staying in, hanging in, and watching the content. Hopefully you found it useful. You can always reach out to us on obviously LinkedIn and socials, and thank you again for registering. So thanks all.